Welcome, everybody. Good morning. I'm so happy you're all here today. My name is Heidi Estrada, and I'm the Community Involvement Coordinator for the Greater Boston Chapter of United Spinal Association. And this is our Saturday Education Series on returning to work after a spinal cord injury. And I hope that this is helpful for people to hear, empowered to return to work, see how others have navigated the process, along with the challenges and how people have adapted and problem solved and advocated in order to return to a career or begin a new career. So just a couple of things. We'll have everybody mute themselves while our presenters are speaking. If you have any questions, we're going to hold them all to the end. But you can put something in the chat if you'd like, just as a placeholder, and we'll make sure that we get to all the questions. So I'm just going to go ahead and get started. And we're going to start with Heather Wood. And Heather's going to start just by, we'll hear from each speaker for about 10 minutes, and then we'll move into Q&A. Okay, so thank you, Heather. I'm going to spotlight you.
That's like the worst part of this whole thing.
No.
I unspotlight myself. Good morning, everyone. It's great to see a lot of you that I know, and it's great to see some new faces here, or new names as well. My name is Heather Wood, and I am going to tell you about how I returned to work. So just as a disclaimer, I do not have a spinal cord injury. However, I do have a very severe variant of Guillain-Barré syndrome that presents as quadriplegia. I have diminished hand function, and I do use a power wheelchair. So when this happened a little over 8 years ago, I had been pregnant leading up to the beginning of a school year. I was a teacher prior to becoming a wheelchair user, and so I went out on maternity leave and thought I would go back to school in a few months. And then I was hit with Guillain-Barré syndrome. So the program that I was working in was a very community-based program. I was teaching students how to take public transportation, or cook meals for themselves, or go to work, which is ironic because I was doing a lot of vocational training. And I knew as soon as it was becoming more and more clear that I was going to be a long-term wheelchair user, that was not going to be the job that I would return to, which is really, really challenging to accept. I loved my students. I loved my coworkers. They were some of my biggest fans throughout my rehab, and to have to submit my resignation letter because it just was not going to be something that I could return to was very emotional, very challenging. But I do feel like where I'm at right now, there's a happy ending. So I'll get to that point. So just know that, even so flash forward, I went back to teaching, but I'm not going to, I just ruined the story for you, but I'm going to go back to that. I always tell my students now, when you hit a wall, you have to pivot. We don't stop and sit still. We bounce off the wall and we go in a different direction. And hopefully the bounce isn't too hard, but either way, you're going to recover from it. So after about 2 years of being a wheelchair user, I was kind of getting the itch to get back to work. It was so great to be at home with my son. And I had a PCA that helped me take care of him, and we would go do fun things. But I realized that I was really missing that adult interaction in my life. And I really needed something that was more mentally challenging for me to just really be like challenged like I was when I was teaching. So I started working with Mass Rehab Commission, and through them, I also got a referral to Easter Seals. And with Easter Seals, I had an assistive tech evaluation, and they helped to connect me with a bunch of different devices that helped me they gave me a laptop so I could search for jobs, and they gave me like a trackball mouse so that because I can't use a regular mouse, it's very challenging. And or some of the other things, some like Dragon Naturally Speaking, which isn't my favorite thing. And ultimately over time, like I was able to get back to typing, even though it's kind of like a hunt and peck still type thing. But Dragon Naturally Speaking is great. If once you, I think, get into like that language, and I'm sure like they're coming out with different technologies every day. That might even be like, so 6 years ago, I don't know. But wireless keyboard, a printer, there was a whole bunch of things that they were able to provide for me, not only like once I got back to work, but in the process of searching for jobs. At one point, I wanted to try to pivot and become a tutor. And that didn't really work out because I didn't have many great connections in like some of the school systems, and that's, you really have to know people to get into that. So then the GBC came kind of falling onto my lap a little bit, and that opportunity changed my life. And I don't say that to sound dramatic, but it absolutely did. It was very different than what I was doing before. However, yes. That's the 8-year-old. So it was very different than what I was doing before, but ultimately it was still helping people. It was giving me that adult interaction. And I did find ways to intertwine education with the GBC. And I believe that one of the, I mean, it goes way back. So Ryan, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that together, Ryan and I kind of came up with the Saturday Education series. So that is kind of where that goes back to. But I really have a passion for education and a passion for helping people. And as the chapter coordinator, which is what I started off as in the organization, I was able to really use some creativity and interact with people who were really at the lowest point of their lives, and I had been there. Overseeing the peer mentor program, it really helped me to regain that confidence that I had lost. I didn't have confidence in myself when I went back to working for the GBC. I felt like it was, at first, I felt like it was something that was going to be challenging for me and get me back out there into the workforce. But also I felt like, what better organization to start working for than a group that literally knows if your PCA doesn't show up, you're not getting to work. If the ride is late, you're going to be late. And I just felt like who else to better understand when I called and said, my PCA didn't show up today, or the ride decided to take me to 10 different locations and then drop me off 2 hours later. I'm going to be late. They had been there too. So I thought that nobody else was going to understand this, and that this was the best place for me to get started. And it definitely was the best place for me. But what I didn't realize was that, I mean, not only legally are other jobs required to accommodate your needs, but there are also people out there that want you to be there and that want to help you out and be successful and create that independence for you, because that's what it's all about, is independence and getting back into work, but also like knowing that you can use resources or different pieces of equipment or whatever that you might need, and you should absolutely take advantage of that. So over time, like I said, I regained my confidence. I finally decided that I was done relying on the ride, and I do have the ability to drive. So I went back, I got an evaluation, and I got my license. And of course, I got my license the day that the world shut down for the pandemic. So it really was only useful for me for a while to like get out on the roads and just get out of my house. But I was not driving to work anymore because we then decided that we were, obviously we didn't really decide, we had no choice, but we were not going to be working out of Spalding because of the pandemic. But it was still nice to have that freedom, have that ability to drive. And just to reference back to MRC helped me get my license because MRC, if you are found eligible, they provide services to help get you back to work. And one of those is driving, getting yourself there from, with some sort of transportation. So a little sadness in my story. So 5 years after working for the GBC, I made one of the hardest decisions that I've had to make in a very long time. It was a very bittersweet decision, but I had been just drawn back to the classroom. Like I mentioned before, I have a passion for teaching. I love teaching. I love working with kids. So I found a part-time position that is 8 minutes down the street from my house at a local high school, and it was going to be a classroom-based job rather than a community-based job. So I applied, I was offered the position, and I had to give my notice to the GBC. So that was very hard because these people became my family. They became people that we became so close over the pandemic. And, but with that being said, like everybody was so supportive and excited for me, shared that excitement, and it still made me very sad, but I was able to then go back to teaching, which is what I ultimately had really wanted to do from the very beginning. So to wrap up my story, because I think I've gone over to the 10 minutes, but I returned last year. I keep saying to my friends that were teaching throughout the throughout the thick of the pandemic, I kept saying, like, I feel like everybody's running away from the fire, but I'm like, I'm coming into the fire, like I'm going back into teaching when so many other people are leaving teaching. So I work part-time. Like I said, I'm in the classroom. I was very scared to get back to the classroom because I was like, are kids gonna be weird about the wheelchair? Are they going to ask me a million questions? Are they going to not respect me because I don't know. I had all these questions and I had so many different fears. But I couldn't have been more wrong. Like my fears couldn't have been more wrong. My students have been so respectful. And sometimes I actually feel better when they do teach me or treat me like a regular teacher, because I'm like, oh, you're using your cell phone when I'm talking. That's normal, so rather than like treating me differently. But there were some questions, and I've shared my story with them. And I feel like on a certain level, because they have invisible disabilities. Some of them do, some of them do not. I have a student who has cerebral palsy. I have another one with muscular dystrophy. But a lot of my students have ADHD, or they have challenges with math or reading, social emotional disabilities. We talk about disability in a totally different way than I think any other teacher could talk about with them. And I feel like I feel very privileged to have that connection with them, because I think that they know I'm coming from a place of understanding rather than like, well, I can only imagine how you're feeling with a disability. Well, I know, and I know that, it can impact all different areas of your life. So when I got back to school, they have got me a new desk. They're working on door opener buttons. There's a bunch of different accommodations that they have and that they are still working on for me. The door opener is a huge piece, getting in and out of my classroom, making sure that the door opener is always working so I can get in and out of the building. But basically working has really given me another piece of myself back. I think when we hit that rock bottom of, an injury or an illness, we don't know what's next. And, we just kind of start scrambling and figuring out how are we going to get back those familiar things that we once knew. And it might not be the same. And I think we say this all the time, it might look different than what you remembered, but if you can get those little pieces of yourself back, I think that just helps you progress forward and helps to regain the confidences that you had before. So that's my
Thank you.
story.
Thank you, Heather. Heather, that was fantastic. I know I need to keep time. I'm not being a good moderator, but it was so just wonderful to hear your story. And if you have questions for Heather, hang on to them, put them in the chat. If you want to just remember what you wanted to ask. Thank you. Okay, so I am going to move to Brian right now. Thanks again, Heather. And if everyone could just stay muted. Brian, you are up, and I'm going to spotlight you here. Hey, Brian. Brian, you're muted. Do you want to unmute? Okay.
Okay, how's that?
Great, thanks.
Great job, Heather. You're a tough act to follow. So my name is Brian Beek, and I'd like to share my back to work journey with y'all. Approximately 14 years ago, I obtained a C6, C7 spinal cord injury after an all-terrain vehicle accident. Currently, I own a small electrical contracting business called Beacon Alarm and Electric. Pardon my shameless plug. But truth be told, I never quite stopped working. In fact, a couple of days later, I was dictating work schedules from my ICU bed for my crew. I'm not trying to say that the journey has been easy by any means. And you're probably asking, how can an electrician work without his hands? So this is how I figured it out. At the time of my injury, I was employed as a project manager running the electrical division for a large mechanical contractor. At the time, work was plentiful and the division was growing. I was at the top of my game. Additionally, I had just completed all the required classes and was scheduled to take the state electrical master's exam. When the accident happened, my professional career came to a halt. Initially, I had plans on returning to work as a project manager, but due to a corporate buyout, my division and position was eliminated. On the bright side, though, I learned that I would be eligible for the extra long-term disability insurance that I took out through my employer. So I strongly urge, any of you to do the same if you have the opportunity. However, I found out that it can be a double-edged sword if you're considering returning to work full-time. From my experience, I found that the people at Social Security, they try to work with you, instead of trying to pull benefits from you. That's what I mean about the double-edged sword. If you're looking to go back full-time, then it could possibly jeopardize any long-term disability benefits that you get. So you kind of have to weigh your options and make sure that it's going to be worth your while to go back. Because you certainly don't want to jeopardize something that you already paid into. So moving along, fortunately, like most people who work in the trades, I had compiled my own personal clientele over the years. So after some consideration, I figured that I concentrate on running my own business. So the first step for me was to pick up where I left off with my master's license and exam, which is required to run a business in the state. So I reached out to the testing agency, and to my surprise, they actually had a medical affairs division, which offered me a scribe as well as additional testing time. So luckily for me, I passed, And that was an immediate ego boost for me to forge ahead. Next thing I did was I reached out to the MRC, similar to Heather, and I met with a caseworker, and we discussed all that the MRC had to offer, including some of their educational services. After weighing all my options with them, I chose to use them as a resource for vehicle procurement, some home modifications, and as well as setting up my home office. So they provided things like a printer, some computer software, and even a desk. They offered an adaptive phone, a whole host of other devices, which I didn't take them up on all of it, but they did have quite a bit to offer. And that was a coordinated effort through Easter Seals, but MRC ultimately is the one that writes the check for it all. So I touched a little bit upon Social Security disability. So there is a connection with that, with the MRC. I believe it is a requirement that you have to be collecting Social Security disability in order to be able to apply for any of the MRC benefits. Social Security disability does offer a ticket to work or a trial back to work program. So that allows you to continue to receive benefits while working on a trial basis. And I took advantage of that. Where I'm at now is I'm kind of just under the threshold of what Social Security allows me to earn each month. So I keep an eye on that, and I manage to stay under the radar by working part-time. What else? So regarding the details of my business and what I do, I decided that diversification would be my plan. So I use some of the project management skills that I learned through the years working for the large employer, apply them to my own benefits, to my own business, but on a much smaller case. We offer things like everything from alarms, cameras, electrical services, energy management, or building automation. Even I dabbled in solar systems. I have a connection with that as well. I offer some consulting services to other businesses. So a whole host of different things. And again, diversification has been the key. And I've even been approached about possibly teaching for electrical services. So, I guess my point is, don't sell yourself short. If you find something that you're passionate about, then go after it. In my case, I found that I had to reinvent myself a bit. Whenever possible, I try to go out and meet with the client on site, although that can be challenging, but I don't let it discourage me. Typically though, I do make it a point to visit a job site, even if it's just to deliver some materials to the guys. But primarily my functions are estimating, bidding on projects, and then hopefully if we're awarded the project, managing it. Being the license holder for my company, I'm responsible for obtaining any permits and of course supervising the projects. It's not easy, and some days it's a struggle, but I certainly couldn't do it without a strong support system. It takes a team, and thanks to my PCAs who help me get going in the morning, my crew, family, friends, and most of all my wife, they all help me make it to work every day. I really enjoy my profession, and I don't think of it as work. So I suggest that you go after something that you're passionate about to reach your goals. But regardless of whichever path you choose, I think the key is just getting yourself out there, being productive. It's good for your mind and your soul. So that's it, short and sweet.
Perfect. Brian, thank you so much for sharing. All right. And if we have any questions for Brian, we can hold on to those until the end or go ahead and drop it in the chat. Okay. I am moving on to David Estrada. I'm just going to spotlight Dave. Go ahead.
Thanks. Hi, everybody. I had an injury 27 years ago. I'm a T4 complete para, and at the time of my injury in 1995, so I'm dating myself quite a bit here, the internet was just starting. I feel like I'm talking about like Henry Ford when he first started the assembly line. But anyway, I was injured. I was a senior at Northeastern University doing a criminal justice degree, and was actually a police cadet for the city of Boston, on schedule or on track to become a Boston police officer. And at the time of my injury, I was living in the city, commuting back and forth to school and to work, and spent 3 months at Boston Medical Center for rehab. And then shortly before I was discharged, I'd say a few weeks, somebody from the GBC came in and visited me and said, "What do you want to do?" And at that time, I was 23. My parents wanted me to come back home, and I said, I don't want to go in reverse. Basically, I don't want to go back home. I was already, out of the house and in college, and again, kind of at the top of my game in terms of, okay, I've got a career set up, and I'm almost done with college. And then this happened, and so the person that came and visited me from the chapter made a few phone calls. I told him I was a senior at Northeastern. I wanted to go back to school and want to go back to work eventually. And so a few days later, my PT came into my room and said, "There's a accessible dorm room at Northeastern that you can return to." And I was like, "Wow, how'd that happen?" They said, "Somebody from the chapter made some phone calls for you." And so that was kind of my entree to the chapter, and my appreciation for that being done. And so the day I was discharged, I literally left the hospital and moved into the apartment on campus. In a couple of weeks, I was back in classes, finishing up my degree. I was Social Security disability at that time. And about 7-8 months later, I returned back to the police call taker, and then couldn't go back and do the physical fitness exam. So I was kind of,
sorry, you broke up some, Dave. Can you repeat what you're saying a little bit?
yeah, where did I stop? Sorry, guys, my internet might be.
Call taker or something like that.
Yeah, so I returned about 7-8 months after my injury. I returned back to work, going to school and back to work on the night shift, the 4 p.m. to midnight shift, as a 911 call taker, and couldn't go back and do the physical fitness requirements to become a police officer. So I was kind of had to resign my position as a police cadet, and became a civilian employee for the city of Boston, and have been ever since. I still work the night shift, the 4 to midnight shift, and about, I don't know how long, so it's 96, 97. I took the LSATs, the law school aptitude test, applied to a bunch of law schools, and this is again while I was working, going to school. Actually finished my degree in 96, and then started working full-time for the police department. Took the LSATs, got accepted to law school. So went to law school starting in 98, and became a volunteer for the Greater Boston chapter. Went through law school, worked nights. So I was working the whole time I went through law school days. When I graduated law school in 2001, I was still involved with the chapter. I became a peer mentor, was volunteering a lot, and had a couple, job interviews with law firms after law school. I luckily passed the bar exam on my first try, and by that time I had become kind of acclimated to, my position, my night shift position at the police department. and I had my days free. And so I became more involved with the chapter, and eventually was on the board of directors, again, volunteering. And there was an executive director at the time who I think lasted 2 years, and then she left, and I put in for the position as executive director for the Greater Boston chapter. So I ran the chapter for 8 years, up until I think 2013. And at one point, I was working for the chapter, working for the chapter was a full-time position. The BPD was a full-time night position. And then I think I was doing some part-time stuff for the Boston Athletic Association, helping recruit athletes with disabilities for the Boston Marathon. So my kind of, my career is with the Boston Police Department. I'm kind of at the tail end of my career. I'm going to be 51 in January, and I'm 27 years post-injury, so I've had kind of enough of work, but have done multiple things, and I guess it's in my DNA. Like I can't not work, although I am looking forward to slowing down, retiring, and maybe still working part-time, but doing maybe some different stuff. I mean, I do have a business as well. I have an LLC, a real estate. So when you're an attorney in Massachusetts, you can apply and get your real estate broker's license and pay a fee for it. So I've helped people buy houses and sell houses over the years. Heidi calls me the jack of all trades, master of none. But I consider myself very fortunate and lucky to be able to do what I've done, and be able to work, and it is, it's fulfilling, obviously. And as I think Heather and Brian said, just if you want to do something, just go for it, and take the chance. It's funny because somebody told me at one point, when I was talking to somebody, and they're like, well, what do you got to lose? Look at what you've already been through. And they're referring to the spinal cord injury and the recovery from the injury, and what have you got to lose? Thanks for having me. Thanks for letting me tell my story, and I'll pass it on to the next person.
Hey, thanks, Dave. All right, and Kevin.
Hi, everyone.
Good.
Tough following up everyone else. You are also incredibly articulate. But my name is Kevin Lacoste, and I have been injured for 3 years now. I suffered a spinal cord injury at the C3-4 level, which means that I have no movement below my shoulder. Prior to being injured, I had just run 2 Boston marathons, and was pretty active in that way, but had always been an educator. I was a teacher, assistant principal, and then a principal at a very small school within the town in which I lived. So shortly after my accident, even when I was in intensive care, I realized that there was not an option. I was going back to work. So that sort of never left my mind at all, even given the challenges. I might have been a bit naive, not really truly knowing exactly the level and the degree of challenges that I was going to have with the level of injury that I have suffered from, but nonetheless kept that mindset of going back to work. So luckily for me, I have an incredibly supportive family and friends that also encourage me throughout the process to go back to work. A superintendent, assistant superintendent, who never questioned for a moment that I could return to work, never pressured me, but also were very supportive and willing to do whatever they needed to do to accommodate me. So after a year off from working, I returned during, as Heather experienced, COVID. So I ran right into COVID. Others were profession, and that was a real challenge. I was returning to circumstances which most educators had never experienced, including myself, and then also was returning to work in a position where I have to heavily rely on PCAs that are able to bring me to work and really do the work for me as I tell them what it is that I need for them. So they're the ones that help to facilitate and do the work that's needed. I will say that, you know, going back to work was not an option for me, in that, similar to others who have already spoken, I knew that there was no way that I could sit idly. I had to keep motivated, and that can be tough. There are days that I wake up and I'd prefer to not go to work, but going to work gives me a great purpose, and more often than not, it changes my mental state for the day. I am a principal of preschool through grade 2, although I've done it all through grades 8 as well. And as cute as they also are challenging too. I think some of the things that I had some challenges with going back to work initially is I'm very hands-on in that I will do all aspects of everyone's job, whether it's being a teacher and jumping in and doing that, or really helping a kid who's struggling, or helping out in the cafeteria, or doing things that a custodian might do. And I found that that was a challenge for me. I had to shift or pivot, as Heather imagined, and realize that there were some things that I either couldn't do and had to make sure that others would help out, or I would have to do it in a very different way. But going into my third year of returning to work, I feel as though I'm as effective, and maybe even more effective than I was prior to my injury. I realized that I have to really work hard during the day to be as efficient as possible, because I don't have a lot of support in the evening. And even though technology helps to support some of the work that I'm able to do, um, oftentimes I am yelling expletives at Siri, or the iPhone when it's not doing what I want it to do. Uh, Voice control doesn't always exactly hear what you want it to hear. But nonetheless, it's been very rewarding. Uh, I feel like when I'm in my school, I'm at my home. Uh, Students ask questions all the time. They're the questions that most adults want to ask but won't. So I oftentimes see adults listening carefully to the answers that I'm providing to students. No, I don't live in my wheelchair. I actually go into bed at night, and they're fascinated by those types of things. So I feel like they're learning alongside of me. They don't really question or stare, and if they have questions, they'll ask them directly. It was interesting to me, as part of a leadership team recently in the last 2 years, we decided that we would visit all of our schools through learning walkthroughs. So I would go into these other schools, and kids would stare. They weren't used to seeing somebody in a power wheelchair or with a disability such as mine. And I had experienced that because the students in my school don't think twice about it. But nonetheless, as everybody said, it's motivating. It's helpful to find something that you're passionate about. I was fortunate enough to get the support from the superintendent's office for me to go back to work. It was a bit sad that my lenses changed, now being paralyzed, recognizing that there were there were no handicap buttons for doors to get in and out of our school. That was built in 1970, and that was something that should have been put into place long before I was injured. But putting those into place and making other accommodations, I do go to Journey Forward still once or twice a week, which means I do have to leave work about an hour to an hour and a half early, And those are the accommodations that are also provided and are required to be provided to some extent through HR. So I feel like, you know, when you think that there might be an obstacle or that you can't do something, as many people have already had stated, there are lots of resources out there that can help you get through some of the challenges that you might be faced with.
Sorry, I was muted. Kevin, I don't know if you're frozen or if you're done. Sorry, did you?
Oh,
Are you good?
sorry, that's it. I'll
Awesome.
take a
Kevin,
bow.
thank you so much, Kevin. Really appreciate it. Thank you. Okay. And we're gonna move to Chris Johnson now. Hi, Chris.
Am I muted? No, I'm muted. Good
You
morning,
are good.
everyone. I'm Chris Johnson. Excuse me if I keep clearing my throat. I'm getting over like the tail end of COVID, but I'm all right. Again, Chris Johnson. I'm a T12 paraplegic. I got injured back in 2006, so that makes it about 16 years now. I've been using a manual wheelchair. Prior to my injury, I was a service manager in the automotive field in Quincy, actually the same area, same neighborhood where I got injured. So I grew up fixing cars, riding motorcycles, things like that. And that was pretty much my passion. My goal at that time was to open up an automotive shop with a buddy of mine who did go on and open up a shop, which I'm proud to see and to witness. So in October of 2016, I got shot. And like everyone else here, you know, my life was kind of turned around upside down, and it was really forced to really figure out what the next phase was or what the next step was in my life. I think one thing I can see from the previous speakers, Heather, Brian, Dave, and Kevin, one thing I noticed is everyone has this really calm demeanor and realize like at some point, I'm pretty sure everyone can probably relate that at some point you had to teach yourself, okay, be patient with your injury, be patient with yourself. I think that was really one of the main things I had to learn, especially being in the automotive field and growing up in the city. Moved around a lot. You felt like you moved 100 miles an hour, you know, and just really learning patience and to say, okay, I have to be patient with myself and be patient with this injury. I think that was the most helpful part for me because nothing was going to happen overnight. So that was around 2006. So I took about a year off of work. I tried to go back to the automotive field. Even I kind of knew I wasn't ready, but there was an opportunity that came up in Weymouth. It was a service station that just opened up, and they were looking for a manager. So I said, okay, I've managed a shop before. This would be a pretty easy transition. And I didn't get the job. Why, I don't know, but I'm glad I didn't get it because like I really wasn't physically ready yet. Like I was still dealing with a lot of pain. I didn't have really a means to get back and forth to work. And then I just wasn't in the mindset just yet to do it. So again, I wrapped up the first year and I actually had an opportunity to join. It's a program called the Men's Health Crew that was out of the Boston Public Health Commission, and it was designed for teens in the inner city who were kind of dealing with trouble and things of that nature. And it really was geared to teach them about different health, I wouldn't say modules, but kind of health topics and different trainings and things like that. I was a little older, I was 23 at the time, but I thought it was a perfect opportunity for me to really kind of figure out what my lane was and what I was going to do. So they offered a stipend. Thing was about $250 a week. And at the time I was getting social security. And from what I was told and my understanding at that time was if you're getting a stipend, you really don't get taxed on it. And I share this piece because I believe it was Brian who mentioned something about being careful when you decide to work or earn. You have to kind of weigh the risk to the reward piece. So I was getting a stipend of $250 a week. Fast forward maybe years later, the IRS contacted me like, you were getting paid, now you owe back taxes on this income. And I'm like, well, it was a stipend. How did this work? So I ended up having to back pay that. So again, to piggyback on what Brian said, make sure you kind of weigh the risk to reward to what's going on. And for me, I realized that it was a necessity to survive at that point. So it was just a risk I was going to have to take and then just have to pay the IRS back once I was more stable. But the other alternative was not earning enough to sustain. So fast forward. So yeah, the program was about 9 months. It was a great program. It taught us a lot about different health issues, asthma. We learned about CPR, just a variety of different health topics to become like outreach advocates in the Boston community. And I met with one of the, actually her name was Barbara Ferreira. She was the Boston Public Health Commissioner. And she just started telling us about different opportunities within the Boston Public Health Commission. And she mentioned Boston EMS as an opportunity to become an EMS dispatcher. And I thought that was a pretty cool idea to become an EMT and, to be able to dispatch. Little did I know that I actually had to do the physical piece to become an EMT, to take the EMT course and to pass it and to, try to go through this, to take the course and then to pass the course. But yeah, she presented the opportunity and I say, if this is something that's feasible, I would like to, try to get in and take the course. So I transitioned into becoming an outreach advocate for the Boston Public Health Commission. I'm sorry, Boston EMS. I worked in their community relations department for maybe about a year or two. At the same time, I began to take the EMT course through Boston EMS because they offer the course to the public. So I took the course, and just when I was wrapping up the course, the state told me they wouldn't license me because I was in a wheelchair. Without going into too many details there, because I'm legally bound to not get into too much of it, we came to an agreement where I can work at the capacity as a dispatcher. We came to that agreement, and then I went on to take the dispatch communicator training for Boston EMS, and I completed that, and then I became employed as a Boston EMS dispatcher. So I've been doing that for about 12 years. It's had its challenges, especially early on with just the whole medical, learning the whole medical field, and then dispatching, and then learning how to become a dispatcher, and just all the challenges that came with it. And I think for me, the thing that kind of kept me going was really realizing every step of my journey, I became better and I became better. What Heather said, it kind of helps build your confidence, because the worst thing, I feel like the worst thing has already happened. Anything else that happens to me at this point is just going to be a lesson, or is going to be just a step in the journey. But the worst thing, being injured, being paralyzed, I don't want to say what more can happen. I don't want to put that out there in the universe and challenge the universe. But at that point, the worst has happened. And I just was looking forward to the journey and becoming better and becoming more and more self-efficient. So I did that I've been doing that for about almost 12 years, I think. And I enjoy it. I work like Dave on overnight shift, and he and I tend to we used to cross paths. He would be going home from work and I would be coming into work, and we would kind of share, small conversations in the parking lot. After working at Boston EMS for about, I think maybe like 10 years, I decided to get into the real estate field. So I took I'm saying EMS, sorry. I took the real estate course, mass real estate course, to become a licensed real estate agent. And I got licensed. That wasn't it was challenging, but I didn't have any challenges with the state as far as licensing me. And it was just something I wanted to get into, something I wanted to try out. And once I got licensed, it's like, okay, now you have to sell houses, right? And if we're all from Massachusetts, not a lot of homes are accessible. So having a strong support system, family, friends, we still go through homes actually now, and whether accessible or not, they'll help me get in. We'll search basements. We'll just kind of figure it out. It keeps me strong, keeps me healthy, and I'm sure it keeps them strong, lifting my almost 200-pound body up, throughout the different properties we're seeing. So I've been doing real estate, I think since 2017. And after about 5 years, I decided to get my real estate broker's license and open up my my real estate company. And I did that back in May and brought on about 5 agents. And we've been going pretty strong so far. So I say all of that to say, is being a paraplegic has had its challenges, but I think just learning patience and still making a decision to decide for yourself, to take risks, and really understand that it's still your decision to be successful, to be either, to choose to be successful, to choose to be happy, to choose to be a failure if you choose that path as well. Meaning if you choose not to make decisions to help better yourself. And I understand we all have our different limitations on, our physical limitations, but I think, there's a common theme here where everyone has made a conscious decision to just take a risk and say, like Dave said, what do we have to lose, so continue to take risk and continue to believe in yourself and to push and go after what you want, because it's been a hell of a journey for me. It's been challenging, but it's been worth it in my opinion and in my experience.
Great. Thank you, Chris. Oh, are you, sorry.
Yeah, I'm done.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thanks. All right. And we are on to our last panelist, Kristen McCosh. Hi, Kristen.
Hey, everybody. I'm so glad to be here. These are really tough acts to follow, so I will try my best. But my name is Kristen, and I am almost 40 years into my injury. I have a C5-6 spinal cord injury. I had it in high school when I was 15, and I'll have 40 years next year. So I grew up with my spinal cord injury in a lot of ways. I like to credit my success by saying I was young and stupid. I didn't know what I was doing, so I just forged right ahead. I knew I wanted to go right back to high school, so I did that. And I was still very dependent. My mother did all my care. I was still part of my nuclear family. My brothers were really supportive. My dad worked overtime to support, our family's needs. So I was lucky in that I still have my childhood friends to support me. I went right back to high school, and that was great. And then I knew I wanted to go to college because both of my parents were teachers. So I got into UMass Boston, and I started school, still young and stupid, not knowing what I was doing. But then when I was in college, a bunch of significant things happened to me. First of all, I got on the PCA program. So I began to develop my independence. And when I was in rehab initially after my injury, the OTs and the PTs, they wanted me to focus on like getting dressed and all these other things. And I have a C5-6 injury, so I knew I would never be completely independent as far as dressing and transfers. So what I tried to focus on was being independent from morning till evening. So I would have PCAs in the morning and PCAs in the evening, but during the day I could be independent. So I focused on learning to drive, learning to use a microwave, learning to get an automatic door opener so I could come and go from my house. I learned how to use the bathroom independently with my leg bag to empty it myself. So I was in a good spot when I got to college. I started working with a driving instructor. I got my license. I got an adaptive van. And then a huge thing happened when I was in college, which the ADA passed. So then all of a sudden I felt empowered with rights, and I'm like, wow, I can do all these things. There's employment laws and all these other things. So I started working with the Mass Rehab Commission, and they helped me get a few internships. And these really gave me confidence. I found I could be successful. I figured out my PCA schedule, which is always challenging for a quad. I got some on-the-job experience. And at the end of my first internship, I was offered a full-time job. So that gave me a ton of confidence. Another significant thing that happened in college was I met my husband. We started dating, and that gave me another boost of confidence. And we just celebrated our 20-year wedding anniversary. So kudos on that. But I don't want to make it sound like it's easy. It certainly wasn't easy. There was a lot of struggling in between. When I thought about employment, I was on Social Security. I didn't know how we'd manage that. But at the time, Massachusetts had just opened a program called Common Health, which is a mass health program that allows people with disabilities to work and earn an income by paying a premium. So I got right on that. My very worried parents were upset because I took myself off Social Security, off Medicaid rather. And I said, I'm going to work. I'm just going to do it. You know, I knew I needed to stay busy. If I sat home and did nothing, I knew I would become depressed. So when I thought about a field of work, I thought, well, I don't really have anything picked out. I was 15 when I had my injury. So what am I going to do? So I was immersed in the disability issues from the ADA and from college and from my friends I had met at college. So I said, well, maybe I'll go into the field of disability. So I decided to own it. And I thought maybe I can have a positive impact, share my experience, you know, make the world a better place, you know. So my first job was with the Cambridge Disability Commission. I was a project coordinator. And then from there, I've had probably 5 full-time jobs since then. And it's been really difficult to leave each one. I did used to work at the GBC with Dave, a wonderful boss, and Brian, and you know, I know Chris for a long time, and Ryan. So I was really devastated to have to leave the GBC at Spalding, but I was appointed as the city's disability commissioner. So I've been there for 12 years now, and really having a positive impact, I hope, on the city's built environment and policies and programs that allow people with disabilities to work and thrive in the city. So I know that was a whole lot really quickly, but I want to leave time for questions. Heidi?
Yeah, that was, oh, sorry. Am I muted? No. Thank you, Kristen. All right, that was quick. But yeah, we have plenty of time for questions. I want to thank everybody for sharing their stories. And oh, we've got some coming in. And I would love to open it up to any questions.
Heidi, can I say one thing?
Yeah.
I'm sitting here and I'm sitting here thinking I completely skipped over my time at the GBC, and I apologize. No slight to the GBC. And if I can, I wanted to share a little bit about that with the GBC. So I was, Dave Estrada actually asked me to come meet with a young man who sustained a spinal cord injury who sustained a spinal cord injury some years back. And I thought he just wanted me to come in and visit this one kid, but maybe that was Dave's way of saying, hey, you're going to be a part of this organization, because since then I've been a part of the GBC. I work as an outreach advocate for them, and we kind of piloted the program, the outreach advocate program, where I went into the community and helped individuals that were in nursing homes, kind of, well, actually, yeah, we helped people that were in nursing homes get out of nursing homes and back into living in the community. We've also helped a number of people receive adaptive equipment, mattresses, wheelchairs, durable medical equipment such as shower benches, things like that. And I volunteer for the GBC for quite some time as an outreach advocate and a peer mentor. So which was probably one of the most significant things that I've done, I feel, because it actually allowed me some time to give back to, you know, the same people that gave to me when I was in my tough times. So yeah, that was one of the things that I meant to mention, but I was a little nervous and trying not to take up too much time. So again, my apologies for not mentioning.
No,
it.
it's great. Well, it's hard to kind of encapsulate your life into 10 minutes. So we understand. No,
yeah.
thank you though. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I think we kind of, a lot of us, you know, for COVID as well, have gone towards remote work. I am mostly working remote right now, which has been kind of a blessing to me because, you know, as I mentioned, I was working 2 or 3 different jobs, and literally, you know, I'd leave the house in the morning and come back, you know, after midnight, Monday through Friday. So it was kind of, as you can imagine, it was taking a toll on me. And then when COVID hit, as bad as COVID was, and I started working remotely, it was a huge burden off my shoulders because I wasn't having to have that commute back and forth in and out of Boston and from job to job. So, and I know that's kind of the way the world is going. And, you know, you can take advantage of that if the job requirements allow you to. You know, you can still, as the ADA, you know, says, perform the essential functions of the job. So it's something I know we all don't do, but some of us can do, and it's a benefit. And, you know, going back 27 years, we're in a totally different environment today, in terms of, again, remote work and jobs that are available, and employers that are much more aware and willing to hire people with disabilities, and make those accommodations. And I think literally they've done a survey. The average accommodation, I think, is less than like $200 for most people. So it's pretty incredible. And I think there's opportunities abound for if you want to go back to work or if you want to work part-time. And a lot of us, I think, have started off after our injuries volunteering. You know, volunteering is not a bad thing to do, and then you can ease yourself back into employment.
Thanks.
Can I say something real quickly?
Please go ahead.
I think something also to remember is that just because you go back or go to something right after your injury, as you're re-entering or entering into the workplace, that doesn't mean that you're committing to it forever. You know, it's definitely something that, you know, if you start off volunteering, you gain some confidence, you keep that momentum going, and then maybe you get, you know, a part-time job, and then you get that, maybe you stick with the part-time job and that works. But, you know, it's important to remember that you're not making a forever commitment just because you're trying something after your injury.
Can I add one other thing too? It's Kristen.
Please go,
So-
jump right in.
Thank you. Just to follow up on something that Chris said, you know, you really do have to be in a good place when you seek work. I know I wasn't quite ready to just jump in and get a job. So that's why the internship helped me, like Dave mentioned, kind of like a trial work. You won't lose your benefits. I had also applied for a few jobs that I didn't get, and I was really glad in the end because I wasn't ready. So you definitely want to make sure that you have your PCAs lined up if you use PCAs, that you have your life figured out as far as like, how are you going to have lunch? How are you going to get to and from work? You know, all those things that really are going to create a successful experience. And like Heather said, it's okay if the first few like don't go so well. You know, maybe you work in a job, you do the trial work period through Social Security, and you learn a few things. But you know, I just can't emphasize enough, like I had to figure out like my medical supplies and my PCA schedule, my medications. And that's a lot to figure out in a day when you're trying to get out the door to work. So, you know, an internship or volunteer job can get you that practice, get you into the routine. But the other thing with a volunteer job or an internship or a job is just that I think staying busy is really key. And if that's, you know, following your passion, if you like music, you know, maybe volunteer at a radio station, or if you like cars, like Chris said, you know, you can do something in that field. But I know that if I didn't work and I stayed home, I'd probably play computer games all day long. So technology is good and bad because we can live virtually or we can live in reality. So I think the ideal is a mix of both, but I would emphasize not to just get, you know, into a whole virtual community if that's your only outlet. I mean, it's great for what it is, but also it does help to get out and talk to people.
Thank you.
Can I share something?
Yeah.
Excuse me. I think one of the key parts of my recovery as well, and I'm sure Dave probably can agree with this, is really getting active in sports. You know, playing wheelchair basketball, wheelchair tennis, kayaking, swimming, just things like that. If you're able to, it helps you physically, it helps you mentally, and it also kind of helps you vocationally. Where I remember I was struggling with holding the cup or just kind of getting around my home. Playing wheelchair tennis actually helped me really be able to adapt better, because you have to push the wheelchair with the racket and make different maneuvers. So I find that being extremely helpful. So just, you know, getting active in playing sports, or, you know, finding ways to make certain sports adaptive is extremely helpful, and the confidence builder, and just being able to get physically ready, because I know I wasn't ready physically when I interviewed for that first job. And after that first year and a half, when I really began to gain more physical strength and mental strength, then I realized, okay, there was a huge difference between the day I was injured in like a year and a half, and my ability to really just, you know, be better, and just to be where I was at that time. So definitely volunteer and try to get involved in sports if you can.
Thank you. Kay had a question. Hi, Kay. She says, thank you all. Briefly, do you own or drive your own vehicles?
Yes.
I own an adaptive van. It is a minivan with a side lift, a side ramp. My first van was a full-size van with a mechanical lift, and I hated it because it was always breaking down. But now, luckily with advances in technology, I have a minivan with a ramp. It's super convenient. I drive everywhere, and I have full quad hand controls. I'm on my third van since my injury. I'm hoping it will last a long time because they're very expensive. But I also went through Mass Rehab Commission to help me pay for it. They pay for the modifications, some of the modifications, but it's still pretty expensive.
Brian, I'll just kind of go through everybody.
Sure.
Vehicle.
Yeah, like Kristen, I also have a van, and I'm on my third one. The first one that I had right out of the starting gates, I did not drive it. I was strictly a passenger. That lasted about a year. And after being a backseat passenger, I learned rather quickly that I wanted to get back behind the wheel. So I'm on my second one now that I drive, and it's a side entry, Chrysler Pacifica, the best one I've had. I love it. Having the independence of driving yourself around is huge. You know, it's huge mentally. And it's worked out great for my business, you know, being able to go on different jobs and deliver materials, meet with clients. So it's a key piece.
That's great.
Yeah.
Heather, thank you, Brian. Heather.
This is my second van that I've had. The first one that I had that I owned, both of them. First one I did not drive, similar to Brian. Also having some PCAs that were less than ideal drivers. I definitely wanted to get behind the wheel again. And so now I own a Dodge minivan. Also side entry, everything is electronic, and so I can be electric, I should say, so that I can be independent driving it myself. And I also, similar to Kristen, and I don't know, Brian, if you did this as well, but went through MRC to get my vehicle modifications paid for.
Thank you. Kevin.
Yes, we own our own van. I don't drive, so it's like driving Miss Daisy. But I am a backseat driver, and I do give my PCAs a hard time when they're not driving the way that I would drive. So in some ways, I still am in full control.
Thanks. Dave, how about you?
Yes, I have driven since I think less than a year after my injury. Again, fortunate to, although I'm paralyzed from the chest down, I have full arm and hand strength. And I don't know how many cars I've owned, a bunch of different cars with just, the kind of plain hand controls that can be installed pretty easily.
Thank you. And Chris?
I do. I'm driving on my vehicle. This is my third vehicle. I do have, like Dave, I have full use of my hands, so I drive an SUV. I've had 2 previous 4-door sedans. I just use portable hand controls, controls you can get offline, like Amazon or something, relatively inexpensive. So yeah.
Great, thank you.
I just want to add one other thing. What's unique about my situation is in my van, the driver, there's a driver seat, there's one seat in the front, so we can pull it into the passenger seat or the driver's seat. So I can drive from my chair, or we can switch it and my husband can drive and I can sit in the passenger seat. So I don't know if they still do that. Like I said, I've been driving since I was 18. So it was like an old system, and every van I've gotten since then, they've duplicated it. But I don't know if that would still happen today, but it's so convenient for us because I can drive or my husband can drive the same van.
Yeah, Kristen, that's the same. The lockdown, or not the lock, but the latching system for my passenger seat is the same as the driver's seat. It's just that the arm that raises and lowers is on the wrong side. So that's the only thing with mine. It's a great feature.
Yeah, I have something else to add in real quick too. So besides my van, my wife recently purchased a Subaru Cross truck, and like most manufacturers, they offered a rebate for vehicle modifications, directly through the dealership. I'm sorry, through the car manufacturer. So it's like about $1,000. And just for the heck of it, I looked into it. So just to get basic hand controls installed on the Subaru, it was like $1,100. So I got $1,000 back from Subaru. So for $100, I got full-blown hand controls in her car. So it gives me the ability to drive either vehicle, my van or the Subaru. So it's nice to mix it up.
Mhm.
However, with the Subaru, I can't be 100% independent, just because I can't get the chair in and out on my own. Unlike guys like Chris and Dave, which can do it with their eyes closed, I'm sure. But yeah, so that's another option out there for driving. So.
Thank you, Brian. David Weiselman has a question. Having PCAs can be challenging and unpredictable. Really? Okay. Has anyone lost a job because of flaky PCAs?
I have not.
Yeah, okay. Has anyone had challenges having PCAs and working, even if you haven't lost a job, but what kind of challenges has that presented?
I feel like it's always challenging. I always say I have a full-time job at work and a part-time job with my PCAs. And as I get older, I feel like it's evolving into more of a full-time job with PCAs. But I've traveled a lot across the country and, across, Europe and the islands. And I can honestly say that, Massachusetts has a great system. A lot of other states don't even have a PCA program. So the fact that we have that is we're already ahead of the game. But yeah, it's always a challenge, and just, enough time in your life to figure it out. And if that means you only work part-time, then maybe that's what you do. But yeah, I feel like it's always a challenge, especially now in this economy. I feel like wages have risen, and people want more money, more than the PCA rate. And also a lot of people are working virtually and they're not ready to go back out, even if they're in the service industry. So yeah, it's definitely a challenge.
I would say that I spoke with Brian early on in my injury, and we talked about the challenges of finding PCAs, and he was the one that let me know that you have to be as creative as possible looking to local colleges, those types of things. I have found Facebook to be the most successful of all the programs. Ironically enough, go onto the website or any of the local sites for Facebook, and that's where I've found the most success. And I do have turnover. I probably I've had 3 different PCAs over the course of my 3 years returning every year, and one that's been very stable for 3 years.
Great, thank you. Asa says, while working full-time, do you have to pay for your PCAs or does insurance still cover it? And Asa, you're in New York, I believe. Yeah.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, so yeah, I don't know if anyone can speak to that about the Mass PCA program, how that works.
I can jump in.
Yeah.
So yeah, in Massachusetts, if you're on Medicaid, which is the state program, was originally for people who were in poverty or had other like difficult circumstances. So back in the 80s, they made a category for people who were long-term disabled but wanted to work. So we can get our PCAs paid for on the PCA program through Mass Health, which is Medicaid. I don't know what it's like in New York. Like I said, Massachusetts is very progressive when it comes to health insurance. So we don't have to pay for our PCAs in the state, but I do know sometimes I supplement their pay with my own money because I want to get really good helpers, and the rates haven't risen as much as I would hope.
So I'd have to check with the ILC here in New York and see if it's comparable to Massachusetts.
Yep, ILCs are a great resource.
Okay. And you said you supplement yours just to keep them,
I
Those are-
do, but only because I can, because I work full time. So I feel like it's a balance. Like, I'm using my money. I work hard for my money and I want to use it the way I want, and I want to use it to get really good care. So I do budget some of my earnings for supplemental PCA care because you only get so many hours. And being a quad, I may have needs that go beyond those hours. So I do supplement.
Okay. All right, thanks.
Yeah, I like Kristen, I was doing that as well. I was supplementing, not all of them, but like my full-time ones, I was supplementing their income as well. And not a huge amount of money, but just enough, because if you have one that fits well with you and you have a good relationship, you hate to let that person go over a couple dollars that they could get somewhere else. So I found it was worth it.
Yeah, that's the tricky part of the PCA program is it doesn't matter how great you are, how long you've been with a person, you get paid the exact same amount as somebody who sits around on their cell phone and does the bare minimum. So it's super frustrating. But I think one of the interesting things is that they are considering here in Massachusetts, and I think it's based off of another program, but this electronic verification something, and I really can't speak too much for it, but because I don't know too much about it, but I just know that it's been talked about for several years, even prior to the pandemic, where you need to be like with your PCA to like electronically check in to make sure that like they're actually working. But one thing, the reason why I mentioned that is because I think if you're working either part-time or full-time, it's just important to note that Mass Health or whatever the insurance is, but specifically Mass Health or Medicaid only pays for medically necessary services. So, if you're working 9 to 5, but your PCA, you're scheduling your PCA hours 11 to 2, I don't really know how that works. I mean, your PCA could technically be doing your grocery shopping and cleaning your house, which is covered, but I don't know, like, what if there was an audit and all of a sudden they're like, oh, you work 9 to 5, how is your PCA working these 3 hours in the middle of the day? Those are questions that I still don't have answers for. I just kind of avoid them. I know the hours that I'm working, I know when my PCAs are not working, but sometimes there is like an overhang of like, okay, I leave for work at 8, but like my PCA will stay until 9:30, finishing up, cleaning up after my son and me in the morning, and vacuuming or whatever else needs to be done. So that's kind of like an interesting piece that I don't know if anybody else knows the answer to that.
Right, that's something I'd have to check into here in New York, yeah.
So just going to read from the chat here. From David Weisselman, the PCA program in Mass is very helpful. You'll get evaluated, and depending on your needs, you'll be assigned so many hours a week, I believe up to 40 hours a week, possibly more. I do believe that there are people with quadriplegia who actually maybe, I don't know, it depends on your needs.
Definitely more. I can just
Yes.
for that myself.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
And overnight hours too. So 2 to 3 hours of overnight. Most people will get 2 hours per night, whether the PCA works for 10 minutes or 4 hours based on, whatever might have happened in the middle of the night. They just pay for 2 hours or possibly 3. Like I said, I think that there are some extenuating circumstances.
Mhm. And Don, who's from Cleveland, he has a meeting on the 29th to make plans to get back to work. He is 5 months post-injury, and he's ready to get back out there. Don, do you have any questions for anybody or anything that you're thinking about as you get ready to get back to work? Don,
I'm taking in everybody's what happened to them and how they got antiquated back into work. I was lucky after my injury. I actually have been on the payroll since my accident. I've been doing a little bit of work from home from the computer, but I work for a fantastic company that's gonna do any kind of accommodations for me when I get back. He didn't think it would be until well after the first year of my accident, but we talked recently, and I'm actually ready to get back out there. It's, being home and kind of secluded. Work has been kind of my passion, and really looking forward on getting back. It's been inspiring to hear everybody's stories on their success on getting back into the workforce, and hopefully I'll be following in the same footsteps.
Yeah, that's great, Don. Well, you'll keep us posted
Definitely.
on how things are going. That's
Yep.
great. Good for you. Thanks. We just have a couple of minutes left. Is there any other I want to give a quick little shout out. Really happy that Salome is joining us from Nairobi in Kenya. We had a chance to meet her in Boston when she was doing a fellowship. Not a fellowship, but was it a fellowship?
It was a fellowship.
A fellowship, yeah. So yeah, Abby.
Hi, this is great. I really loved hearing these different experiences. My son Sam was injured like 3.5 years ago and went back to work right away with the employer he had. And that was a great experience. I think it put him on the right path. And he recently changed jobs, which I thought was a bold move. And I felt a little wistful because his employer had been so super to him. But I think it was the right thing because he's really stimulated by this new job. It's, more up his alley in general. The question I have is just, being a mom, I like to keep an eye on his physical health. And so how do you balance the need for pressure relief, rest, exercise, et cetera, with working a really professional job?
That's a great question, Abby. I think as life goes for all of us, there is no complete balance, right, that we experience. So it's tricky. And as I mentioned prior to COVID, just working multiple jobs over the years, it was physical and it was mental for me. Like I think I had hit a wall. And then, as we all experience UTIs, and what I've learned over the 27 years of living with an SCI is that if you're run down, you're going to get a UTI. I mean, it's kind of almost inevitable if you don't get enough sleep, and you can exercise too. But I think just getting that, trying to find that balance. And again, I don't think there is any complete balance, but just being vigilant and again, I think we're in a time point in the disability community that we can talk to our employers and get better accommodations than we ever have. So that's something I think to leverage as well. If you feel like you can't get a balance, you can't find a balance, and you're working too much.
And I'd like to add to that as well. I would just say that over the course of 7 days, I try to find that balance. You know, there are some days where I'm out straight with work and I'm not even realizing that I haven't laid out. I have significant tone and really need to be stretched every hour at the least, but sometimes 2 hours will go by because things are so crazy. So I look at it over the course of 7 days to make sure, as Dave mentioned, that I get plenty of sleep, plenty of stretching, you know, and that mental health piece too, that break from both work and other situations. So I would just echo what Dave said.
I would like to add to it as well. I'm not sure what level injury your son has, but I think it's important to try to ask for those accommodations. Say if he's in the office chair or he's sitting in his wheelchair all the time, if he's able to transfer, see if his job can offer him a chair that has a cushion that's going to help his skin. Being mindful to do pressure reliefs, lean side to side. Wearing compression socks. I'm up quite a bit. I work overnight and I work during the day. So I tend to deal with a lot of swelling in my feet. And sometimes I'm like on the borderline, do I have a blood clot or not? Because I've been up that long. So just like Dave said, there's really I don't want to say there's no balance, but it's all on your decision to try to create that balance. But in the meantime, just have compression socks, try to get the equipment that you need, and find some downtime because you will get ran down, and it's still up to you to really find that balance.
Yeah, likewise, I'll just throw my 2 cents in. It, like with most jobs, it's easily to become consumed with work sometimes, and you just lose track of time. You might, forget to eat or take medication. So I found that it's vital to not get overwhelmed by it and, listen to your body. Like if you skip your medication or something like that, you might start getting a lot of tone spasms. So, you have to find that balance, and your health is more important than any work. Work will always be there.
And no one's going to know your body better than you. So your employer's not going to know what you need. Your coworker is not going to know what you need. So unless you advocate for those, accommodations, which I don't think anybody would get turned down as long as they were reasonable. So whether it's a break or, whatever it might be, it's important to ask for those.
Thank you. Obi.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank all of the panelists. Great presentations, everybody. And lots of great information. And like I said at the beginning, nobody does it the same way. Everybody finds their own way in their own time. So it's great stories and really, really inspiring to hear.
Absolutely. Thank you, Obi. And thank you to everybody. Thank you for attending. Thank you to all of our panelists. If anybody has, any questions, or they are thinking about going back to work and are looking for some support or help or whatever it may be, maybe to connect with one of the panelists here, please feel free to reach out. Always feel free to reach out to me or to anybody, Obi, anybody in the chapter with any questions or any way that you think we might be able to be helpful to you. And if we don't have the answers, then we will find them for you, do our best to find them. Wishing everyone a happy Thanksgiving. If anyone's around next Thursday between 11 and 1 and want to drop in to say hi, we're going to have a Thanksgiving open house Zoom. So we'll see some of you there. And hope you have a great rest of your weekend.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah.
Thanks,
everybody.
Heidi.
Thank you.
Much
Thank you,
appreciated.
guys.
Nice to see you all.